brand new trifold, I think this really shows where the priorities are inside Samsung. I think the story of the Galaxy S26 makes a lot more sense in the context of 2020. When Samsung launched the Galaxy S20, they made a big bet by pushing the base model up to a full $1,000. Now we're not talking about the Ultra. This was the base S20. And you know what happened? It didn't work. Samsung had to start discounting the S20 almost immediately after launch. So the following year with the S21, they basically admitted their mistake and cut the base price to $799, a full $200 less. And to hit that price point, they had to make some real cuts. The S21 went from glass to plastic on the back, and the display dropped from QHD to 1080p. Now the S20 was such a big step forward for the line. I mean, they brought 5G, 120Hz. This is the first time they did the Ultra phone, which actually has been really successful, but as always, they ran into one of the biggest problems you can run into as a smartphone manufacturer. Timmy Cook. He just said no, buy an iPhone instead. Here's the thing that most people don't think about. Apple's base iPhone and Samsung's base Galaxy S have been in this pricing dance for years. Samsung can't really charge significantly more than Apple for a standard smartphone because, well, why would you pay more for the Galaxy when you can get an iPhone and vice versa? Samsung and Apple have pretty much always competed over the same customers, and now that the base S26 is more expensive than the base iPhone, you gotta imagine that is going to be a tough sell. But here's where it gets really interesting. Apple has a massive advantage that Samsung just can't match. In the last quarter alone, Apple's services business, so we're talking about the App Store, iCloud, all the stuff you're probably spending money on by owning an iPhone, generated $30 billion in revenue. Now that's not accounting for
Kang the Conqueror should be the villain of the next Avengers movie, and I'll explain why. Welcome back to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy, and in the entirety of the multiverse saga, I don't think any character was abused worse than Kang the Conqueror. This guy is one of the all-time greatest Avengers villains of all time, and the MCU had him losing to ants. Now, I'm not so sure if we will ever see one of the greatest Marvel villains of all time face off against the Avengers in a film. Now, I should clarify that when I'm talking about Kang the Conqueror coming back, I don't necessarily mean Jonathan Majors. In fact, I think it would be an upgrade to recast him with, say, Denzel Washington or John David Washington. So I'm going to explain what went wrong with the MCU's plans for Kang and then offer up an alternative idea for how Kang should have been introduced into the franchise. But we're also going to talk about how he could still be the main villain of Phase 7 and how a Kang Avengers movie is the perfect setup for the MCU's mutant saga. First, let me offer up a little background on Kang the Conqueror. He's always been one of my favorite villains in the comics because he is primarily a time traveler and I love time travel stories. In terms of Avengers villains who just face off with only the Avengers, not counting like Dr. Doom or Thanos, Kang always ranks in the top 3 with Ultron and Baron Zemo's Masters of Evil. In his first appearance, he was a mustache-twirling villain with one goal, to conquer time. He's from the 31st century where mankind has built a utopia, but he gets bored, steals Dr. Doom's time machine, and starts to conquer various times and places throughout history. But the character evolved to have more nuance over time. He fell in love with Ravonna Renslayer, who died in his arms. The irony being that he couldn't save her even with his mastery over time. Years later, they added in the idea that Kang is always in conflict with himself. Time-traveling characters Rama Tut and Immortus were retconned to be past and future versions of Kang, which actually led to a weird moment where Mantis married Tony Dalton's character the Swordsman and Kang was conducting the ceremony. Some highlights from his story include the Kang Dynasty saga from 2001, which spanned 14 issues of the Avengers. In this story, Kang actually wins and conquers Earth. Then the Council of Kangs we saw in Quantumania was introduced way back in Avengers 267, where Kang murders all of his alternate selves. But I think the definitive Kang story, the one I wish they could have adapted, is 2021's Kang the Conqueror, Only Myself Left to Conquer by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing. In this retelling of his origin story, Kang encounters his teenage self when he discovers the time machine and proceeds to train him to become, well, him. We see Kang fall in love and then lose his love across many different time periods. He is filled with good intentions but becomes a warlord, even fighting in a war between Rama Tut and Apocalypse in ancient Egypt. Now the comic ends in a full circle moment. Kang arrives in the past, ready to guide and teach his younger self. And part of this story includes the years where teenage Kang was also a superhero called Iron Lad. He traveled to the modern era and became a founding member of the Young Avengers. Now in the comics, Kang's stories are primarily about time travel and not the multiverse. There was even the huge series Avengers Forever, where variant Avengers team up to fight Immortus. For the most part, Marvel does not do big multiversal stories that often. Kang is primarily a time traveler, and he's already beaten the Avengers. And if he loses, he'll just go back and try it again. And his appearance in the MCU for me was frustrating because they nailed so much about what makes the character great. His confidence.
But you thought you could win.
His brutality. And the power that he seems to exude over everyone. But I think the Multiverse Saga went wrong when they tried to make Kang into the big, overarching villain of the saga, instead of keeping him micro-focused on being the villain of one great Avengers movie. So let's talk about where Marvel went wrong with Kang and what their original plans were for the character. Actually, let me ask Colton what he thinks about this. Hey, Colton?
Hello?
Yeah, was Kang much of a multiverse guy in the Hold on, what are you holding?
It's my phone. Can we make this quick? I'm gonna run out of minutes.
Out of minutes? What kind of phone service do you have?
I use it to play Snake.
Dude, you gotta upgrade to Mint Mobile. They're the sponsor of this video. We have been using Mint Mobile for years. It is a great service. We've never had an outage. This is the nation's largest 5G network. Now, all plans include unlimited talk and text. But get this was a seller for me because I travel a lot. Hotspot is included, 20 gigabytes on unlimited plans. But most importantly, it is incredibly easy to add data. I just use an eSIM, so I don't have to go to a store, wait in line, or even get a new phone. It is incredibly easy to switch to Mint Mobile. You can do it right now with an eSIM while you're watching this video, and you get to keep your phone number. Mint Mobile lets you choose the plan that's right for you so you don't overpay. And right now, for a limited time, Mint Mobile is offering 50% off their unlimited wireless plans. Viewers can lock in their lowest price ever, just $15 a month for a 3, 6, or 12-month plan. But best of all, it is incredibly affordable. I cannot believe how much we were overpaying. But Mint Mobile offers premium wireless without that premium price tag. So stop letting your wireless bill break your bank. Get this new customer offer and pay just $15 a month for a 3, 6, or 12-month plan. That is 50% off an unlimited wireless plan at mintmobile.com/screencrush. It's mintmobile.com/screencrush or click our link below. Now, this is a limited time offer. An upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for a 12-month plan is required. That's the equivalent of $15 a month. Taxes and fees are extra, and this is the initial term plan only. Over 50 gigabytes may slow when the network is busy. Capable devices are also required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
Aw, sweet. I'll get an eSIM and get started today.
Oh, you will not regret it. Now, back to what I was saying. Now, I actually like a lot of what Marvel was doing with Kang the Conqueror in the Multiverse Saga. The series Loki did a great job paving the way for He Who Remains, the Multiverse of War, and the inevitable destruction of the multiverse. Jonathan Majors brought sadness to the character, and we felt like this man had truly tried everything and had spent eternity knowing that he was a failure.
I've gone through every scenario. This is the only way. TVA works.
This is a guy who essentially sentenced himself to eternal prison just to keep the multiverse safe. That's a compelling villain. And in Quantumania, we saw a villain with those same kind intentions that was masking his inner ferocity.
I am Kang!
But then, beat my ants. We always wondered, why did Marvel let their big bad get defeated by such a minor hero? Well, according to leaker Daniel RPK, Marvel's original plan for this guy was not to be the Kang the Conqueror. Kang Dynasty would have seen the Avengers going up against multiple variants of Kang that were set up after Quantumania. Frankly, that idea is a tough sell. If we want to get invested in Kang as a character, then he needs to be a character, not an army of characters. This is why Thanos is a better villain than Ultron. Thanos was a real person with a heartfelt desire to do good. Ultron was an army of robots, and frankly, I still have trouble understanding his motivations. I imagine the screenplay for this concept was really hard to crack. How do you make the audience care about an infinite number of Kangs? Like that scene in Quantumania where Scott splits off, you don't care about the infinite Scotts because they're just copies of the original that you do care about. So Marvel squandered Kang the Conqueror. Yes, he should have defeated Ant-Man and escaped the quantum realm, and then his war with the Council of Kangs probably should have decimated reality. But hey, that's all in the past. Now let's talk about what could have worked better and how Kang could still be a major villain in Phase 7 of the MCU. My what-if scenario here is simple. Imagine that Kang, as a time-traveling villain, was the villain of an Avengers film that capped off Phase 4 of the Multiverse Saga. Now, I've mentioned this several times on this channel, but this saga really needed Avengers movies to cap off its phases. Those team-up films gave us the feeling that we were always building towards something, and it gave everyone a reason to watch everything, because they didn't want to feel left out. The Phase 4 Avengers would have been living in the shadow of the OG team that just saved the universe. In fact, that was the theme of a lot of Phase 4 projects, dealing with the events of Endgame and wrestling with the weight of these new responsibilities and the legacy of the original team. So in Endgame, the Avengers created time travel, and Tony Stark even says,
"If you mess with time, it tends to mess back."
the Avengers disrupted the natural order by tampering with the fabric of time. So, Avengers 4 should have shown the repercussions of that decision, and the new team then has to clean up the mess of the old team. So imagine we went with a comic-accurate version of Kang, a time traveler from the future, except now it's a descendant of Tony Stark who finds his ancestor's time machine, which means that Tony Stark literally created the villain that we're fighting in this movie.
This could have been avoided if you hadn't played with something you don't understand.
And Tony's descendant, Kang, has all of Tony's worst traits. His ego, his narcissism, his need for control. Except that in the future, everything, all the technology is so advanced that you never really have people in your lives who love or challenge you. And this is how, unlike Tony Stark, Kang never made a connection with a human being that kept him from indulging in his worst impulses. And let's just say that he accesses Tony's database because, I don't know, he's got access to his genetic code. So now we've set up a Sins of the Father storyline where the new Avengers have to prove that they are better than the team that came before. And as long as I'm writing down fanfic, it would be great if Rhodey's Armor Wars project
What's Armor Wars?
was far enough along that he was already dealing with the fallout from Tony's machinery falling into the wrong hands. But you know, we can't go back in time. However, Kang still could be the villain of Phase 7, and here's how. Now, Secret Wars is probably going to end with a soft reset of this universe. Stories will be simplified, and there won't be a multiverse. So this means that Kang, if he's still around, can be reimagined as a villain whose main focus is time travel and mastering time. He wants to conquer the past, present, and future. And in the previous version of the MCU, you cannot actually change the past. Making changes only resulted in a diverging timeline. But post-multiverse saga, Kang's tech could allow him to travel through time and actually alter past events. See, I think that time travel stories offer richer storytelling opportunities than the multiverse. The point of an infinite multiverse is that everything is inherently pointless. There's an infinite amount of everyone, so character deaths mean nothing. But time travel stories connect to our curiosity about the past and our fears and hopes for the future. Time is the one aspect of our lives that we can never truly control. Time should be the enemy of the Avengers. So let me walk you through some possible scenarios of what we could see happen in a Kang-led Avengers time travel film. We could open with the Avengers forming a new team, but then Kang shows up and kills half of them. So the remaining team would have to use time travel to stop Kang before he can become Kang. This is kind of like the snap in Infinity War, but it happens at the start of the movie. But then maybe another time traveler shows up to rescue the Avengers and tell them what's going on. This time traveler, in an Iron Man suit, says that he's from the future and explains Kang and how he's attacking all of time at once. This time traveler would be Iron Lad, Kang's younger self, and he could be their guide in this movie. Now in the comics, he joined the Young Avengers, but here he can show up to help the team understand what's going on. And he gives them a mission: use my time travel tech to stop Kang's invasion at various points in the timeline. And he tells them that Kang has one weakness. He has to ensure that his own timeline will still occur. So he cannot harm or kill any of his ancestors, which is why he did not attack the OG Avengers. Tony Stark has to live long enough to have a daughter and invent time travel. Now, the fact that the main hero is Kang's future self could be a big twist later in the movie as we watch this young hero slowly make decisions and compromises that will turn him into Kang the Conqueror. Or maybe we skip all that and maybe White Vision can gather the new team together to stop Kang. He's analyzed all the probabilities and figures out that there is a problem in the time stream. After all, he's not just a computer, he's powered by Infinity Stone energy, and the abilities of all the stones are connected. So this would mean the team could be random heroes that the Vision has gathered together because probabilities determine who's going to be the most useful. Now, regardless of how they get together, here's a few team members that I think would be fun to include in this what-if scenario. Sam Wilson. He didn't get the time travel in the last movie, and maybe he can go back in time and meet Isaiah Bradley when he was in his prime. Shang-Chi has this connection to the ancient world, and he has the 10 rings. Maybe Kang actually left those rings in the past after the Avengers defeated him in that time period. Then maybe Shang-Chi is left with a dilemma. Does he allow the rings to stay in the past and create the monster that his father became, or does he let history unfold? We're going to to see another character face a similar dilemma at the end of the movie. Kang also took on the identity of Rama-Tut and conquered ancient Egypt, so Moon Knight would be a great addition. He is the avatar of the Egyptian god Khonshu and would be useful in the past when Khonshu's forces are fighting against Rama-Tut. And maybe, the same thing happens. Some of Kang's tech gets left behind, and then that tech is adopted by a young Insaba Noor who becomes the mutant villain Apocalypse. Shuri also fits into this plotline perfectly. As Black Panther, she has a spiritual connection to her ancestors, and we could see the glory of Wakanda in the past. Or maybe we see how Wakanda in the future breaks bad and conquers the planet. Because the real fun here isn't just traveling to the past, it's coming to the future. Marvel Comics have invented all sorts of messed up dystopian futures where the world is being ruled by despots. Like a future where the villain wins. We saw this in stories like Age of Ultron, where he conquered the world. Or on the DC side, there's the excellent story Rock of Ages, where the Justice League travels to a future where Darkseid conquered the Earth. They could go 1,000 years in the future, and Thor is still there, looking the same. They could also introduce Maestro. This is an older version of the Hulk that is super smart and is turned into a villain.
And it was a really angry green man.
He's actually, I think, the greatest Hulk villain because he shows that the Hulk's anger and brutality actually comes from Bruce Banner. Or they could just go 40 years into the future and team up with older, grizzled versions of themselves. We saw this, for instance, in the show Legends of Tomorrow, where they team up with a grizzled, one-armed Oliver Queen. Or they could do a proper Old Man Logan, visit a future where Kang has killed all the superheroes, but an elderly Wolverine is still alive and kicking.
They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
And maybe this could be where they introduce the Blade Runner-esque Dystopia 2099 universe. And of course, all this time traveling would also work as a kind of backdoor pilot for the X-Men franchise. I already mentioned that their visit to ancient Egypt could give the mutant Apocalypse the advanced technology he needs to become a threat across the millennia. In the comics, he finds a crashed alien ship. In the movie, it could be Kang's gear. There's also the dystopian X-Men futures, and there are several of them. There's most famously Days of Future Past, where humans have enslaved and wiped out the mutant race. There's also the distant future where Apocalypse rules the world. We could introduce mutants in these storylines so we know, hey, here's how the mutant story ends. That way, when the X-Men become a team in the present day, we know that, hey, your time has an expiration date. We know what the mutants are fighting for and that they're fighting against their own extinction. Now, I know that we already did a time travel film with Avengers Endgame. That movie was mostly a victory lap for the MCU that gave us a medley of the franchise's greatest hits. What I'm talking about here is a true time travel film where the heroes are forced out of their comfort zones. In each case, the heroes would be focused on the same internal journey, legacy. Each of them is struggling with the weight of what came before. They begin the movie trying to live up to the legacy of the old Avengers. Young Kang is also trying to fix his own legacy before he can become a villain. And at the end, each of them learns that legacy doesn't matter. You just have to do your best in the present day. And the finale of the film could be Iron Lad's transformation into Kang. Maybe he makes a decision to kill his future self, or to wipe out a city to kill his future self. And then the heroes have to talk down their new friend and remind him he gets to choose his own legacy and not be defined by the older generation. And of course, this lesson resonates with all of the team members. Shuri has been haunted by the deaths of her family, living up to the legacy of T'Challa. Sam has been trying to live up to Steve. Shang-Chi is haunted by the violent legacy of his father. Moon Knight is haunted by the lives he's taken in service of Khonshu and all the other avatars that came before. And Yelena Belova is filled with regret over her time as an assassin. So this would make the climax have more of an emotional punch than, say, Age of Ultron, where the heroes did not really have character flaws to overcome in the final act. It was a punchy robot movie. Using Kang in a time travel story would allow these heroes, and hopefully the audience, to move on from the past of the MCU and to look forward into a brighter tomorrow. But guys, that's just my thoughts on Kang and if he should come back. Do you think Kang the Conqueror is wasted, or were they better off ditching him to begin with? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, or you can find us on Twitter, Blue Sky Threads, or subscribe to me on Substack. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.
Avengers Doomsday will serve as a direct sequel to Avengers Endgame, but what exactly does that mean? Well, the Avengers time heist in Endgame was extremely reckless, and it is why the multiverse is about to meet its Doomsday. And we have found every clue, Easter egg, and loose end in Avengers Endgame that were always there to set up Avengers 5, even back when it was Avengers the Kang Dynasty, and even more so now that it's Avengers Doomsday. Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and the Avengers Doomsday Doomsday trailer is expected any day now, but we also have news that, one, Avengers Endgame is being re-released in theaters next year before Avengers Doomsday comes out, and rumor has it that the film will serve as a direct sequel to Endgame. Now, that is something that yours truly has been saying for months now. Roll the clip. I really think it's like, oh, hey, this is a sequel to Avengers Endgame. But let me tell you exactly what that means. What do we mean when we say a direct sequel? Well, think of it this way. Avengers, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Avengers Infinity War were Avengers 1, 2, and 3, but they weren't really direct sequels to one another. They weren't even really a true trilogy because you had to watch a lot of other movies in between those Avengers movies to even follow what was happening. But that all changed with Avengers Endgame, a movie that was a direct sequel to its predecessor, Avengers Infinity War. What was also different about Infinity War and Endgame was that they came out just 1 year apart, which is going to be the case for Doomsday and Secret Wars as well. Now, with Infinity War and Endgame, there was of course also Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel that came out between those two films, and sure, they were important to watch, but Avengers Endgame, on a story level, it was a direct continuation of the story in Infinity War. The events of Infinity War and how that movie ended were the very foundation to Endgame's entire premise, and we assume the same will be true for Doomsday and Secret Wars, which, like I said, also come out just 1 year apart. So it makes sense for Endgame to be a direct sequel to Infinity War, or for Secret Wars to be a direct sequel to Doomsday. But Avengers Doomsday being a direct sequel to Endgame has some surprised because it is coming out nearly 8 years after Avengers Endgame, meaning that we will have had 10 MCU movies and 9 MCU shows that have come out between the two films. So I get why this news is news and has some people surprised, but here's why it didn't surprise me in the slightest, because I have seen Avengers Endgame more times than I care to admit, and every time I go back and watch it, as the multiverse saga has continued, it becomes more and more clear to me that Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers, they were setting up many things in Avengers Endgame that would have major ramifications for the next saga and for the next Avengers film. Now, before you comment away, I know that it wasn't always going to be Doomsday, it was going to be Kang Dynasty, the Russo brothers weren't always coming back, but I do think that while the Russos originally weren't going to do Avengers 5, I could totally see it having been the plan for them to come back for Secret Wars. And I also think that while Downey Doom wasn't always the plan for Avengers 5, I do think he was always the plan for Secret Wars, because this is something that has been in the works before even the MCU began. I think it's something that's been in the back of Kevin Feige's mind all of this time, the Russo brothers as well, and while they may not have had any like concrete plans, I still think that they put some things in their films, including Avengers Endgame, that were planting seeds for future potential storylines, and that's exactly what we're going to see in Doomsday. And I think it's been pretty obvious from the jump that Endgame, while yes, it was the end of the Infinity Saga, well, actually, I think technically Far From Home is the end of the Infinity Saga, but anyway, in a lot of ways, Endgame was also like a first chapter to the multiverse saga. I mean, that movie had the Avengers fighting an alternate timeline variant of Thanos in the final battle. And what is the multiverse saga about if not time travel in the multiverse and variants? Endgame is where this whole multiverse saga story began, so it makes perfect sense that Doomsday would be a direct sequel. I mean, we're talking Tony's creation of time travel, Loki's escape, Steve staying in the past with Peggy. Those are just a few of the major loose ends that Avengers Endgame introduced that were setting up not only the events that we've seen so far in the saga, but the very events of Doomsday. So let's break down every single moment, clue, and slight tilting of the head from Endgame that have been hiding in plain sight as big setups for Doomsday. So Avengers Infinity War, it ended with Thanos winning and snapping away half of all life in the universe. This defeat was something the Avengers could not live with, and 5 years later, they embarked on a mission through time to collect the Infinity Stones from the past, bring them back to their own present day, their universe, and use the stones to snap back all the lost lives. And this very action to undo the defeat that they couldn't live with is what has now led us to Avengers Avengers Doomsday. Despite Hulk saying the past can't change your future, what he left out is that it can damn sure create alternate universes. Now, the Ancient One explained this to Hulk, and we got our first look at the concept of branching timelines in the MCU in Endgame. And it's also an Endgame where we learned how time travel and the multiverse were intertwined. These were our first steps into the multiverse saga. Now, Hulk thought that by returning the stones to their rightful place in time, that it would be as if they never left and all would be well. But the Ancient One was not convinced. That is, not until Hulk told her that it was Doctor Strange who handed the stone over to Thanos in the first place.
Strange, he gave it away. He gave it to Thanos. Yes.
This moment is showing us the Ancient One ignoring her better judgment and deferring to the judgment of Doctor Strange. But what she doesn't seem to know is that,
from our experience, the greatest danger to the multiverse, it turns out, is Doctor Strange.
So the holidays are coming up, and as much as I am looking forward to seeing people
and getting He-Man action figures for Christmas.
Yes, and that, the holidays though, they make my social anxiety kick in big time. And when I get anxious, that's when I get really bad about biting my lips. And I know you guys probably have your own bad habits. You're with friends or family, people step outside, and you feel that old habit start to kick in. But I could never quit my bad habit cold turkey. Instead, I had to replace that habit with Fume. And guys, I've been talking about Fume on this channel for years now because it's one of my favorite products that we promote, and it really worked for me on so many levels. This is an award-winning flavored air device that you can use anywhere. And I want to be clear, this is not a vape, it's not an e-cig, and it's not a nicotine product. It is something totally different. A simple, satisfying way to replace bad habits without inhaling anything harmful. Fume is simply natural flavored air that gives you something to reach for without the chemicals. It uses plant-based cores, it tastes great. My favorite right now is orange vanilla, but there are tons of other flavors to choose from. And I know you probably have your own bad habit, but sometimes you need more than willpower. You still need something physical to reach for, and Fume is that alternative. I also love the built-in fidget feature that makes an incredibly satisfying sound. More than 700,000 people have already added Fume to their daily routine, and I totally get why. It's simple, satisfying, and doesn't come with any of the downsides of smoking or vaping. And right now, if you order the Journey Pack using my code ScreenCrush, you'll get a free Fume topper. It's this little rubber piece on the end. It's great for chewing, so if you've been thinking about changing your habits, this is the perfect first step. Go to tryfume.com/ScreenCrush, or you can scan the QR code on screen to grab yours today. Now, back to what I was saying. Strange is a meddler. He can never leave well enough alone, kind of like somebody else I know. As we saw in What If, there's a universe where Doctor Strange couldn't accept the death of Christine Palmer, and he tampered with time and reality trying to undo her death, and that resulted in the death of his entire universe. And we saw a different Doctor Strange do the same thing in Universe 838 when he was trying to find a way to stop Thanos. This also resulted in the death of an entire universe. And in Infinity War, in the 616 universe, once again, we saw the character of Doctor Strange, our Doctor Strange, use the time stone to look at possible futures, aka he looked at the multiverse. He tampered with the natural flow of events, and while he may have successfully set the Avengers on a path to beat Thanos, he also set them on a path to doom the entire multiverse. But hey, Strange isn't alone. It was also, of course, He Who Remains, aka Kang, who allowed for all of this to happen.
And who do you think paved that road? Any guesses? Survey said?
He who remains.
And that's where we'll start, Loki. When the Avengers went back in time to 2012 to get the Tesseract, aka the Space Stone, they wound up creating a splintered timeline where Loki escapes with the Tesseract. Now, if you've seen Loki and you're watching this video, so I assume you have, we know this splintering timeline was pretty quickly pruned from existence by the TVA, and they arrested that variant of Loki. That variant would then go on to meet He Who Remains, dethrone him, and Loki now sits on the throne at the end of time. Now, while I would very much recommend to anyone who hasn't seen Loki to totally watch both seasons before seeing Doomsday, I do not think it will be required viewing. Again, because Avengers Doomsday is serving as a direct sequel to Endgame. And what happened in Endgame? Well, we saw Loki escape, and that loose end was never addressed again in that movie, in Endgame. It wasn't addressed once. We didn't see Loki's escape addressed until the Loki series, and that is when we found out what happened. But I think going into Doomsday, you are not going to have to have seen Loki to understand what happened. I think when we meet Loki and see him sitting on his throne, and perhaps when he meets the Avengers or even reunites with his brother, we'll get a simple expositional line letting everyone, including the audience who hasn't seen Loki, remember in that last Avengers movie when Loki escaped with the Tesseract? Well, that set him on a very different path and gave him some new perspective, and he learned a lot about the multiverse and its chaotic state, and he is now a very different character. Loki can then explain to his brother and the others how the multiverse has expanded, and he's doing his best to keep it intact, but that the multiverse is still slowly dying, and now a new threat has emerged, Doctor Doom, a threat who is also a product of the meddling of Doctor Strange that was permitted by an anxious to retire He Who Remains. And in doing all of that, in having Loki tell the Avengers what has been going on, because the Avengers are going to need to be filled in as well, if they handle it right, that can also be a very great way, especially if they lean on Endgame, to let the general audience, who perhaps hasn't seen every single thing since Endgame, or maybe if this is their first Avengers film since Endgame, it'll make it to where they can still feel like they can follow the story and understand what is going on. So, Loki taking over in the mainline MCU sacred timeline, joining with the rest of the multiverse, that was arguably the biggest cause and effect example for how Endgame and the actions of the Avengers directly set up the events of Doomsday. Or is it? Well, let's take a look at some other examples. And hey, real quick, while I have you guys, I did want to mention our massive holiday sale that is happening right now on our merch store, screencrushmerch.com. We have brand new holiday designs like the new Doug ornament where he looks like Snoopy from the Charlie Brown Christmas special. My wife actually designed this one, so you better go buy it. We also have this Happy Life Day shirt. We have my favorite, the Bonesaw vs. Human Spider, a Fox Force 5 t-shirt, and that's my secret, I'm always working with the Hulk hunched over a desk. In addition, for this week only, we have a ton of deals on the store, 40% off all apparel, 15% off collectibles, buy 3 get 1 free mugs and pint glasses, buy 2 shirts, get 1 50% off, and hoodies, hats, and bags are all 25% off. But wait, there's more, 30% off all of our Star Wars parody merch and our superhero merch, and store-wide, all products are 25% off. Now, the sale is ending soon, so be sure to go check it out and get your stuff or risk being nude. Links are in the description below. Now, back to what I was saying. So, we know that the 2012 branching timeline was pruned by the TVA, meaning that Steve telling himself about Bucky being alive and letting the Hydra people know that he knows their Hydra, Tony having Ant-Man give other Tony a heart attack, that was all pruned away. But there was also Thor and Rocket's journey to 2013 Asgard, where they not only removed the ether, aka the Reality Stone, from Jane Foster, but Thor also steals his own hammer. Now, before we move on with the others, I should mention that, yes, theoretically, when Cap went back to trim all the branches, he was going to return the Infinity Stones and even bring Thor's hammer back. We see that when he got on the time platform, he had Thor's hammer. According to Bruce, when Steve returned the stones, that should essentially be them pruning those other timelines, making it to as if they never existed.
We can return each one to its own timeline at the moment it was taken. So, chronologically, in that reality, it never left.
But this idea that Steve returning the stones to the moment they got them would somehow undo those timelines or prune them from existence, that contradicts Bruce's earlier insistence that
Changing the past doesn't change the future.
So even if we are to believe that Cap returning the stones did get rid of those alternate timelines, the 2014 branch has some major changes that even Cap can't undo by simply returning the Power Stone and the Soul Stone. The altering of the past that we saw when they went to 2014, where Thanos, Nebula, and Gamora leave their 2014 timeline and travel to the future, the present-day MCU, that results in Thanos and Nebula both dying. There's no putting them back. And also Gamora stays in the mainline MCU, in her future, but the present-day MCU. So none of those three ever go back to their timeline. And, Thanos and Nebula are dead, but Gamora, she is still living in the present-day MCU, and she is a being who is living in a timeline in which she is not supposed to exist. And as we've learned, this greatly destabilizes and confuses reality.
Stephen, your arrival here confuses and destabilizes reality.
If He Who Remains foresaw all of this, and the Avengers time heist was all part of his plan, which it was, then the same way that the TVA went and pruned the 2012 branch, they could have very well gone and pruned those other branches as well. So either the TVA cleaned it up, or Steve's mission of returning the stones cleaned it up, and the TVA only had to step in and personally prune the one where Loki escaped with the Tesseract because Steve didn't have a space stone to take back to 2012 and return to that timeline.
What they did was supposed to happen. You escaping was not.
But this brings me to one of the biggest ones, and that is the unplanned mission of Steve and Tony to 1970. This one resulted in not only stolen Pym particles and Tony learning that he was perhaps adopted.
Oh, brother, here we go again.
Hear me out. Tony was perplexed as hell when Howard said that Maria was pregnant.
My wife's expecting, and too much time in the office.
Not only does he look confused, but he also even asks,
How far along is she?
now, this could be nothing, but with the confirmation that Doomsday is a direct sequel to Endgame, like I've been saying for a year, then this could play directly into how and why RDJ is playing Doctor Doom. We did a whole video on this. I won't rehash it here. Be sure to go check it out, though, if you haven't seen it. Okay, now, that brings me to our boy, Steve. Steve did a big no-no. He traveled back in time when he was returning the stones, and he created a reality where he lived a life with Peggy Carter. For the first time in his entire life, Steve was selfish. And he was selfish at the advice of Tony Stark.
Maybe I'll try some of that life Tony was telling me to get.
Steve Rogers going rogue and creating an entire new universe, a new timeline, whatever. That was a major loose end that was left behind in Avengers Endgame. It was even him dancing with Peggy was the closing shot of that movie. Let's watch it. I don't know about you guys, but yes, that scene, it was very sweet, but it is also super eerie, especially the cut to black. Look at this smiling dork. He thinks he's got it all figured out. And hey, maybe he does. He obviously would go on to live a great life with Peggy. They grew old together, etc. But I guarantee you that this Steve, this old man Steve that we see at the end of Endgame, he saw some shit over the years. I don't think he lived a quiet life. In fact, I think this old man Steve that we saw travel back to the mainline MCU to give Sam this shield, more on that in a second, I wouldn't be surprised if that old man Steve has already lived the events of Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. I think come Doomsday, and yes, despite Chris Evans' denial that he's in Doomsday, he's in Doomsday. And he will also be a key character. Now, his actions, I think, at the end of Endgame will be directly linked to the events of Doomsday, just like Tony's snap will be directly linked to Doomsday. And yes, that was confirmed by the Russo brothers. So what I'm saying is that this guy that we see dancing with Peggy, and then this guy that we see sitting on the bench with Sam, there's a lot of years between these two guys, and I think that the events of Doomsday and Secret Wars happened in this guy's lifespan. So that brings me to a fun theory that I've talked about before, but I love it so much I want to talk about it again. Stick with me because it can get a little timey-wimey, but here's what I think happens and how this final scene of Endgame could be the very first shot of not just the movie, but maybe the very first shot of the trailer. Maybe the trailer opens with that. I think we see the Steve who went and lived a life with Peggy get pulled from that life and thrown right back into the fight, into the events of Doomsday and Secret Wars. And it is as a result of him being partially responsible for the state of the multiverse, and him also wanting to save this new branch reality that he has created and that he calls home. And I think in Doomsday or Secret Wars, we will see Sam Wilson, Captain America, give his shield to Steve Rogers, either because he's injured or he's dying or some reason. He will pass the shield, maybe even intending for it just to be temporary, like, here, go kick his ass, and hand Steve the shield, and he goes and beats up Doom. Whatever. Some way, shape, or form, I think Steve gets the shield.
Give this man shield.
And remember, Steve will not have his own shield. When he left on the time platform, he didn't have a shield with him, meaning that somewhere along the way in his new life, between this moment and this moment, he gets a shield at some point. Well, I think that that point is going to be when he gets that shield from Sam Wilson's Captain America, who got it from Old Man Steve. So we can see Steve Rogers hang on to the shield the rest of his life, but then when he's an old man, he travels back to his home universe, Universe 616, having lived an entire life with Peggy and having fought the battles of Doomsday and Secret Wars, but before he dies, he is now making sure to complete the circle of giving that shield that he got from Sam back to Sam, the same Sam who would then become Captain America and be in the events of Doomsday and Secret Wars, and then give it to Steve, and then Steve gives it back, and it completes the whole cycle.
It's like a snake eating its own tail.
Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a sidetrack. I do think it's going to happen. But that was all the how Endgame sets up Doomsday. Those are some of the key moments from Endgame that could totally be picked back up on in Doomsday. But I also want to talk about the why. Why is it important that Doomsday be a direct sequel to Endgame? Well, for a few reasons. One, Endgame is the second biggest movie of all time, second only to Avatar.
Why are you blue?
Everyone saw Avengers Endgame. Everyone. But unfortunately, the same just cannot be said for the bulk of the Multiverse Saga. The Multiverse Saga has made a lot of shows and a lot of movies, and the fact of the matter is that not everyone has seen every show and movie. And it would be stupid to make an Avengers movie that requires you to have seen a bunch of movies and shows that you know, you being Disney, Marvel, whoever, that they know a good chunk of the general audience just has not seen. So I think Doomsday being a direct sequel to Endgame is narratively brilliant. It just makes so much sense, as we've discussed throughout this video. But I think it also makes sense from a business perspective. This is the first Avengers movie since Endgame. It will have been 7 years by the time Doomsday comes out. And look, while we all expected for the first post-Endgame Avengers movie to be more in the same vein as that first Avengers movie, where we see all the new characters team up for the first time and have a culmination event of a phase, not an entire saga, that was what we thought would happen, but that didn't happen. I mean, not only did Marvel skip the phase-by-phase Avengers movies, they skipped doing an Avengers 1 or Avengers Age of Ultron style Avengers movie in this saga as well. And they just went straight to a saga capping event with Doomsday and Secret Wars, hoping to replicate what they did with Infinity War and Endgame. The only problem is, no one cares about this saga. And the only reason Infinity War and Endgame did so well was because of Age of Ultron, was because the first Avengers movie, was because all of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 and Phase 3 films that came out between and after those movies. With the Multiverse Saga, there's nothing to culminate, and that's why Marvel is going back to RDJ and Chris Evans, the Fox X-Men. And these two movies, Doomsday and Secret Wars, they are serving as more than just cappers to the Multiverse Saga, but really as a capper, a culmination to every Marvel movie ever. And that is how this film will be perfectly and brilliantly marketed. This film is going to pull on the nostalgia strings, not only for the Fox X-Men or a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, but nostalgia that audiences have for the MCU itself and nostalgia for the Infinity Saga. So I think it's a great idea to have Doomsday be a film that you can walk into without having seen a damn thing since Endgame. You should be able to walk into that movie and watch it, because for a lot of people, that's going to be the case. If you want this movie to make $2 billion or knock on the door of $3 billion, you're gonna have to make a movie that can be watched without people having seen most of the saga that is leading up to this movie. Because the fact of the matter is, well, I would say most people have seen at least 1, 2, maybe 3 of the projects. Very few people have taken the time to watch them all. And I think Marvel knows that, and that is why I'm very happy to hear that they know it and that they are doing the right thing by making this movie something that can be watched by everyone. Alright, those are just my thoughts and theories, so I'd love to hear yours down in the comments below, and if you're new here, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified every time we upload a new video. For Screen Crush, I'm Colton Ogburn.
Assemble.
Hey, welcome welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and these are all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the final battle of Avengers Endgame. We are going to do a complete, in-depth analysis of this entire battle and spot some Easter eggs that have been hidden away for years, but not anymore. The entirety of the Infinity Saga had been leading to this moment, and boy did it deliver, so let's break this baby down. And hey, be sure to check out our merch store, ScreenCrushMerch.com, where we have lots of fun Marvel-inspired parody shirt up for grabs. Thank you so much for your support. Alright, so right as the Avengers successfully assemble the Infinity Stones and Hulk snaps back everyone that Thanos had snapped away, we see 2014 Thanos' ship arrive via Tony's time machine with the help of an undercover variant of Nebula. Thanos then bombs the Avengers facility, and just as the explosion blasts through the windows, we see Ant-Man shrink, making him more durable and able to withstand the impact of the blast. Now here, behind Ant-Man, we can see War Machine's new armor that he will be wearing when Ant-Man, now as Giant Man, emerges from the rubble holding Hulk, Rocket, and Rhodey. When they do emerge from the rubble, Rocket is on Rhodey's shoulder, and he cocks his gun with a look of, oh yeah, just like this scene from the first Guardians, where we see Rocket on Groot's shoulders when the Guardians form for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
Now, going back a little bit, before we see them emerge from the rubble, we can see Hulk holding up the debris, just like in this panel from Secret Wars #4. And then we get the iconic trio of Cap, Thor, and Tony approaching Thanos, sitting and waiting, echoing how we saw him sitting at the end of Infinity War following his victory, and foreshadowing when he will take his final seat following his defeat at the end of this battle as he dusts away. Now, you'll also notice that Thanos is holding stones in his hand, showing his desire to grasp the Infinity Stones in his hand, just like his future self did in Infinity War after successfully gathering the Infinity Stones. Thanos mentions how the Avengers have now gathered the stones for him this time around.
And then, with the stones you've collected for me.
And that line gives us another reason as to why Thanos is just sitting and waiting. He is waiting for the Avengers to approach him because he knows as this battle ensues, they will once again gather the stones from the rubble in hopes of keeping them from Thanos, but Thanos is confident that he'll be able to take them from them, and they will have once again gathered them for him. So as the trio of Iron Man, Thor, and Cap approach Thanos as a united front, this is reminiscent of when this trio fought in the woods in the first Avengers movie. And we even get callbacks to that very first fight that are used against Thanos that you'll see here in a sec. Thor says,
Let's kill him properly this time.
Showing that Thor harbors some regret for brutally beheading an unarmed Thanos at the beginning of the film, and that he is now looking forward to killing him in battle instead. As Thor charges up, we see his scraggly beard transform into a braided beard, reminiscent of the many times we've seen Thor alter his appearance, utilizing the power of Mjolnir. As the battle ensues, we see Thor immediately go for the head, having learned from his mistake in Infinity War.
You should have gone for the head.
Thor supercharges Iron Man's suit with a lightning blast, this time on purpose, unlike in the first Avengers movie when they are fighting and Thor inadvertently gives Iron Man a major assist.
Power at full 100% capacity. How about that?
Thanos' blade begins to spin like a helicopter blade, possibly a reference to the infamous Thanos copter from the comics that we would actually later see in the Void in the Loki series. Now, as Thor and Thanos fight, we see Thor summon Stormbreaker, but Thanos catches it mid-air. And I should make sure that this is clear because I've seen others seemingly confused by this. You do not have to be worthy to wield Stormbreaker. It's just a super powerful axe. There's no worthy spell on Stormbreaker like there is with Mjolnir. So we see Thanos put his other hand on the butt of the axe, and he presses it into Thor's chest, just like Thor does to Thanos here in Infinity War.
I told you, you'd die for that.
So Thanos is unknowingly getting some revenge for his alternate self. We then see a resting Mjolnir begin to rise and then thrown and hits Thanos, then it bounces back into the clutching grasp of Steve Rogers, confirming what we've all long known, Cap is worthy.
I knew it.
Now, this is a callback to Age of Ultron when all of the team attempted to lift Thor's hammer, and we see Steve Rogers make the hammer nudge. Some have speculated that Steve was only a little worthy at the time and couldn't quite lift it, perhaps because he was still harboring the secret that Bucky killed Tony's parents, which he would later confess to after being caught in Captain America Civil War. But Kevin Feige has come out and said that Steve, being the humble and worthy guy that he is, was just sparing Thor the embarrassment and himself of the attention that would come with him lifting the hammer. So I think that Cap totally could have lifted the hammer in Ultron, and he knew that he could have lifted it, but opted not to, and that is why he had such confidence in this battle that he could run up to it, pick it up, and use it in this fight against Thanos. And when he picks up the hammer, we hear this music begin to play. This is the same music that we heard here in Captain America, the First Avenger, when Cap takes this risky leap of faith, perhaps signifying that this was the moment that he became worthy. And now that music is coming back around. So we see Cap throw the hammer at his shield, creating this sonic boom, another callback to the fight scene in the woods from that first Avengers movie. And a callback to this moment in Age of Ultron when Cap and Thor do the move together.
Like they're lining up. Well, they're excited.
Now, as Thanos and Cap fight, we see Thanos grab Cap's wrist, not the hammer itself, taking us back to that elevator worthiness debate from Age of Ultron.
But if you put the hammer in an elevator,
We still go up.
elevator's not worthy.
I'm gonna miss these little talks of ours.
Thanos isn't worthy to lift Mjolnir, but he can stop its wielder, just like the elevator can give the hammer a ride, or Spider-Man a ride, or hang on this coat hook in Thor the Dark World.
This is going crazy. All the stuff we saw spreading.
Next, we see Thanos use his blade to break Cap's shield in half, just like we saw here in Tony's vision from Age of Ultron, where he foresees the arrival of Thanos. And like in the comics, when Thanos breaks his shield. Now, this also tells us that despite vibranium having been the strongest metal on Earth, that is until the arrival of adamantium in Captain America Brave New World, Uru, the metal that Thanos' blade is made of, as well as Mjolnir, Stormbreaker, and the Gauntlet, is just as strong or stronger than vibranium. It's even been speculated that Uru could be the same metal as adamantium, just given a different name on Earth. Remember, in the MCU, adamantium is found in Celestials, so it is a cosmic metal. Now, as Cap stands in defiance against Thanos and his army, we see Thanos looking upon him with what I would describe as pity, reminiscent of this scene in Infinity War.
You have my respect, Stark.
Now, Cap standing alone against Thanos is a callback to this moment in the Infinity Gauntlet comics when Cap stands up against Thanos and says, as long as one man stands against you, you'll never be able to claim victory. As Cap stands ready to die in battle with Thanos and his army, we hear interference in his earpiece. It is the voice of Sam Wilson.
On your left.
Now, this is of course in reference to this classic line from Captain America the Winter Soldier, Sam's first MCU appearance.
Don't say that. Come on!
This is also foreshadowing that Sam has always had Cap's back and that he'll have his back when he chooses to retire. And we should also mention that at the end of the film, when Sam approaches an elderly Steve Rogers, he approaches him on his left. And look, not to be that guy, but I do have to nitpick the fact that this comm message from Sam comes in before the portal actually opens, so, like, are the comms not like walkie-talkies and have to be in range? Because, you know, Sam is across the globe right now over in Wakanda, so before the portal opens, the comms actually shouldn't be working unless they're, like, satellite comms, which that would work for sure, but then you have to ask, how did Sam know which side of Cap his portal was going to be opening on? Hell, how did he even know a portal was about to open? Did Wong give Wakanda a call? It doesn't make sense, but you know what? It's okay, because it's cool. As the portals open, see Wakanda, New Asgard, Contraxia, all iconic MCU locations. We see the Wakandans come out marching and chanting Ibambe, just like in Infinity War. We see the Titan crew of Spider-Man, Star-Lord, Mantis, Drax, and Strange. They dusted on Titan in Infinity War, so they reappeared on Titan when they undusted. We also see the Ravagers from Guardians 2. We see Korg Meek, Howard the Duck, and a shit ton of sorcerers. We see Valkyrie flying a winged horse like we saw here in Ragnarok. And you'll notice that the portal that we see Wasp come through is a little portal. And then we see Pepper fly in wearing her birthday present that we saw Morgan playing with earlier in the film, the rescue armor. We see Strange look to Wong and say,
Is that everyone?
to which Wong says,
Like you wanted
more.
This is a meta reference, of course, to the fact that, yes, we want more, but Secret Wars will likely give us that more, so it's okay. Now, in this wide shot, we can see a little VFX goof. If you look closely, Cap's shield in this shot is the full shield, not the broken in half shield. Now, you could say that this represents that now with his team standing behind him, the shield is symbolically reformed, or it's just a goof. It's a goof. And hey, that wasn't the only mess up in this giant battle. In this panning shot, Doctor Strange can be seen wearing the Eye of Agamotto around his neck, but we know from Infinity War that it was destroyed by Thanos. As Cap catches Mjolnir, he says, "Avengers Assemble," finally giving us that iconic catchphrase from the comics, which was teased here in Avengers Age of Ultron.
Avengers!
As our heroes charge toward Thanos, we can see Spider-Man swinging, but what is he swinging from? This is giving me Spider-Man 1 video game flashbacks. Answer, he is swinging from Giant Man. I love that detail and how it's a callback to his fight with Giant Man in Civil War. So as the fighting ensues, we see Mantis using her sleep powers to subdue this guy, just like she did Ego in Guardians 2 and Thanos in Infinity War. So Tony and Peter reunite, and Tony goes in for a hug, catching Peter off guard because in Spider-Man Homecoming, Peter thought Tony was going in for a hug, only for this to happen.
That's not a hug. I'm just grabbing the door for you. We're not there yet.
So that's why Peter says,
Oh, this is nice.
because it's a hug that he's long been waiting for from his mentor. So the time platform that was in the Avengers facility was destroyed when Thanos bombed the base, but Ant-Man reminds them that they still have the quantum tunnel time machine in his ugly brown van.
That wasn't our only time machine.
And that La Cucaracha horn sound was first heard here in the first Ant-Man. Now here on Tony's heads-up display, we can actually see the van appear on his map and begin to blink. We then see the Wasp and Ant-Man reunite, and we hear Wasp call Cap, Cap.
Right, Cap.
Scott smiles because this is a nod to this scene in Ant-Man and the Wasp, where she made fun of Scott for calling Cap, Cap.
The Cap needed help, sir.
Captain America, Captain Cap. It's what we call him.
And right here behind Ant-Man and the Wasp, we can see Rocket and Groot having their reunion. Now, while Ant-Man and Wasp are hotwiring the van to power up the time machine, we cut back to a wide shot of the battle where we see yet another goof, Ant-Man in his giant man form putting a Leviathan through a portal while he's actually supposed to be down in the van. So this was either a variant of Ant-Man teasing the multiverse saga, or it was a goof. It was a goof. Now, when Iron Man lands to talk to Strange, we hear the same sound that has been used throughout the Infinity Saga for when the Shellhead lands. But we first heard that sound here in Iron Man 1. Now, if you listen closely here, we can hear the sound of the hovercrafts used by the Chitauri. The same sound that was used in the first Avengers movie during the Battle of New York when the Chitauri attacked. Now, at the start of the film, we saw Tony and Nebula playing this paper football game while adrift in space.
You don't need to do that.
And this was teasing the Infinity Gauntlet becoming a football of sorts and being passed around from Avenger to reach the quantum tunnel. Now, when Black Panther lands, we see his purple kinetic energy blast that we first saw introduced here in Black Panther.
Delete that footage.
This same kinetic redistribution of energy tech would later be used in Sam Wilson's vibranium wings in Captain America: Brave New World. So we hear Black Panther say,
Wait! Give it to me.
a reference to this scene from Civil War.
We haven't met yet. I'm Clint.
I don't care.
Black Panther then makes some ground with the gauntlet, but then passes it to Spider-Man. Spider-Man is then swarmed and activates Instant Kill, a reference to this scene from Spider-Man Homecoming.
Activating instant kill.
No, I don't want to kill anybody.
Cap hears Spidey's call for help and says,
Hey, please. Face up.
this is in reference to Captain America: Civil War, when Cap and Spidey met for the first time and had this brief exchange after their fight.
Where you from?
Queens?
Brooklyn.
Thanos is then cornered by Wanda, and according to Kevin Feige, Wanda almost killed Thanos and would have killed Thanos in this moment if Thanos hadn't called for rain fire.
Rain fire! Messiah, our troops, just do it!
And, you know, Thanos' willingness to trade lives, sacrificing his own soldiers to save his own life, that shows a key difference between Thanos and Cap, with Cap saying this in Infinity War.
We don't trade lives, Vision.
Next, we see Okoye kill Corvus Glaive, getting revenge for his massacre of members of her Dora Milaje in Infinity War when they were protecting Shuri and Vision. So after Captain Marvel's badass entrance, and damn was it badass, we see her take point on the gauntlet from Spidey. Then we get that dumb girls get it done scene.
I don't know how you're gonna get it through all that.
Don't worry.
She's got health.
And can I just say, I hate this scene because it's such a man's idea of what makes for a girl power scene. You know what's a great girl power scene? This scene in Infinity War.
He'll die alone, as will you. She's not alone.
That scene feels real. This scene, on the other hand, is so on the nose and poorly done, and it is a disservice to my ladies of Marvel. I mean, why is Peter asking how Captain Marvel is going to get through all of that when we just saw her shoot through Thanos' ship like a nuke? I think she can glide through Thanos' army, no problem. Anyway, Thanos throws his blade and destroys the Van Tunnel. He then gets his hands on the gauntlet, and we finally get to see him and Captain Marvel go at it. He tries headbutting her, and Homegirl doesn't even flinch. So he then grabs the Power Stone from the gauntlet, and he grasps it in his hand to punch her. And we can see the purple energy of the stone begin to fuse through his hand, just like here in the first Guardians of the Galaxy when Star-Lord holds the Power Stone. Tony looks on in terror as Thanos nears yet another victory, and knowing what he has to do to stop him. Tony's realization that he's going to have to take the stones and snap Thanos away, likely sacrificing his own life, is then confirmed as that one possibility in which they win that Strange had referenced here in Infinity War.
How many we win?
One.
We see Strange lift his finger, confirming to Tony that yes, that's what you need to do. And as he lifts his finger, we can see his hands trembling. And his hands tremble because of his injuries from his car wreck in Doctor Strange. So next we see Thor fly in, and he trades a few more blows with Thanos, and he utilizes the worthiness of Mjolnir to stop Thanos from being able to take Stormbreaker. We then see Cap leap in, and he attempts to help Thor pull Stormbreaker's blade into Thanos, but they're both thrown off, and Thanos goes to snap. The Infinity Stones are glowing, and their energy is traveling through his body, and then we see Tony jump in and grab the gauntlet, and the second Tony touches the gauntlet, we see the stones stop glowing. This is because Tony is now in control of the stones because his nanosuit is directly linked to the nano gauntlet. And this time, instead of pulling the gauntlet like here in Infinity War, he shakes the gauntlet just like his dad told him here earlier in the film.
Shake that, don't pull it.
Yeah. So yes, a fart joke saved the universe. Now, as Tony is wrestling Thanos for the stones, we hear this music begin to play. This is the same theme we heard in the first Avengers movie during the Battle of New York when Tony is making the sacrifice play. The one-way trip to save New York from being nuked by taking the missile through the wormhole. This is a full circle moment, and they are brilliantly using music to showcase it. In the first Avengers movie, we heard Tony and Cap have this exchange.
You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play. To lay down on a wire and let the other guy crawl over you.
Everything special about you came out of a bottle.
And this final battle proves that Tony is willing to make the sacrifice play and lay on the wire so someone else can crawl over, and Cap's lifting of Mjolnir proves that everything special about him does not, in fact, come from a bottle. His super soldier strength had nothing to do with his ability to lift the hammer. It's his big heart, which he's always had even before the serum, that made him worthy. So Thanos says,
Inevitable.
Of course, a callback to his future self saying the same thing at the start of the film.
I am inevitable.
As Thanos realizes he doesn't have the stones, we see them begin to form on Tony's fist, and we see the energy of the stones traveling through his neck veins. And Tony says, "I am Iron Man," the same line that ended the first MCU film, now concluding the Infinity Saga. Thanos and his army begin to dust, and here we can see Ebony Maw clutching his stomach and stumbling toward Thanos as he dusts away, just like Spider-Man did as he stumbled toward Tony in Infinity War, following the snap right before he dusted. We also see Proxima holding her dead husband Corvus as she dusts away, just like this shot from Infinity War of Wanda holding Vision's dead body as she dusted away. We see Thanos wobble over and sit down, and this wobbling of his legs was foreshadowed in his opening speech from Infinity War, where he says,
I know what it's like to lose. Turns the legs to jelly.
Thanos' dramatic final moment where he takes a seat in defeat not only was foreshadowed by that speech, but we see Tony and Cap do the same thing following their defeat in Infinity War. Thanos then takes his seat, and the tracking of the shot is identical to this shot of him taking a seat following his win in Infinity War. And that was a complete breakdown of the Avengers Endgame battle, the grandest battle of the MCU so far. Let me know if we missed anything down in the comments below, and if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you get notified every time we upload a new video. For Screen Crush, I'm Colton Ogburn.
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in Captain America: First Avenger. Guys, we are diving deep into this breakdown, giving you behind-the-scenes details and all the little things that the MCU would call back to years later. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how this movie sets up a 7-film character arc for Steve Rogers. And I am so excited to show you guys these brand new Cap parody merch designs that we have at our merch store. There's the America's Ass commemorative stamp, the Ross 24 shirt, and the 8-bit RPG where Cap is presented with the choice: ask if anyone wants to get out or hail Hydra. These are available as t-shirts or hoodies for cold weather, and we love designing all of our Marvel parody shirts for you guys, and you can find these and other designs on our merch shelf below. Also, if you want to become a member so you don't miss out on any new merch announcements, the link for that is below as well. Now, first of all, you have to appreciate just how risky this movie was when it was made. They were setting a superhero movie 70 years in the past, and Captain America was not even considered to be a bankable property at the time. He was adapted in a movie serial in the 1940s, 2 1970s TV movies, and an atrocious 1990s straight-to-video movie. But Marvel Studios saw that this is a great character who has been reinvented by countless creators over the years. He was originally created in 1941 by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. Now look, accounts on his creation vary, with Jack saying that he drew the hero first, and Simon saying that they wanted to come up with a hero who was powerful enough to defeat the ultimate villain, Hitler.
Get yourself a good villain, and then get a foil for the villain. Adolf Hitler was there, so I figured, well, he's a live one on his own brutal way. He'll be the villain, and get yourself a patriotic guy to be his foil.
Now, Kirby passed away in 1994, but Simon actually lived long enough to see the first Avenger in theaters. But guys, you also have to remember that in 1941, the USA was not even at war with Germany, and depicting a hero socking Hitler in the jaw was considered controversial. Kirby told a story about 3 thugs who were in the lobby who wanted to show Kirby what a real Nazi would do to Captain America.
I once had 6 Nazis call me up, and they said, well, we're waiting for you downstairs. We're going to beat the daylights out of you, you know, for writing these stories about Hitler. And so I says, hold on, guys, I'll be right down. And, of course, I take the elevator down, and but there was nobody there. I looked in the street, and, of course, they wouldn't be there. And, you know, they wanted to fight, well, what the heck?
And that's the thing. Simon and Kirby instilled that kind of courage in Steve, which bleeds through into this film, where his main motivation to fight is...
I don't like bullies.
So the film was directed by the great Joe Johnston, who was a visual effects designer on the original Star Wars trilogy and Raiders of the Lost Ark. He also directed the highly underrated film The Rocketeer. So The Rocketeer is, I think, largely why Marvel tapped him for this movie. It's an adventure set in World War II about a hero who uses a jetpack to fight Nazis. Now, the jetpack was given to him by Howard Hughes, who was the model for young Howard Stark in this movie. So it's appropriate that Howard gives Steve his shield, just like Howard Hughes gave the Rocketeer his jetpack. So the movie opens in the Arctic with Steve being frozen in ice. Now, I actually think this is one of the movie's biggest mistakes, but I'll talk about that later in the video. Now, you guys probably know that Steve was originally going to enter the MCU in The Incredible Hulk. There is a deleted scene where Banner attempts suicide, and the resulting avalanche was going to free Captain America from the ice.
Yeah, this is much better.
Yes, it is. But this movie does name another monster that's responsible for Cap's release. Climate change.
This landscape's changing all the time.
Now, believe it or not, this entire scene was filmed on a smoked-up soundstage with a green screen. But the sun behind them is actually a light that is on tracks, so they can create the illusion of movement. They also say,
I don't know, it's probably a weather balloon.
because because after people claimed an alien ship crash landed in Roswell in the 1950s, the government said that it was merely a weather balloon. But this remark actually isn't far off, because this crash was associated with an alien object, the Tesseract. Now, when they cut a hole in the ship's roof, a shaft of light shines down, one of the movie's many homages to Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indy discovers the Well of Souls. Now, this whole sequence was shot on the same set as the final fight. In fact, they actually had to pause filming the climax so they could dress up the set to look frozen, and then they had to unfreeze it for the final shots they needed. This was one of 115 sets designed for the film, almost one per page of the screenplay. Now, after that brief tease, we go to Tonesburg, which we first saw here in the year 500 in Thor, and then again as the setting for New Asgard in Avengers Endgame and Thor Love and Thunder. Now, the original opening scene here would have actually shown a giant Hydra tank rolling through the town, chasing this man who was trying to warn the caretaker of their approach. Also, notice the code name of the movie was Frostbite, which is also the name of the Blu-ray when you pop it into your computer. And then we see Schmidt's car, which was frankly an engineering marvel created for this film. Notice the headlights on the car are slits, like the eyes of a Hydra mask. But this was also a common practice during the war. People taped up their headlights so they were harder to spot by enemy planes at night. Now, this car has 6 wheels, in case Schmidt needed to go off-roading. But, like a lot of the vehicles in this movie we'll talk about later, this was actually based on a real design of the Mercedes G4. The car is 28 feet long with a turning radius of almost 40 feet, so it took a 700 horsepower engine just to move the damn thing. Hugo Weaving based his German accent partially on the great director Werner Herzog.
I would like to see the baby.
And notice that we can see just a little bit of pucker here in his neck that shows the skin mask that he's wearing to cover his red skull. So, in the comics, the Red Skull first appeared in Cap's very first issue, and he quickly became a model for like every supervillain going forward. He is a true believer in Hitler's twisted views of racial purity, while his greatest enemy is also a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Superman. This is one of the many common themes between Steve and the Skull that we'll talk about a little later in the video. Traditionally, the Skull is usually chasing the Cosmic Cube, a wish-granting MacGuffin that the MCU reimagined as the Tesseract. So, here I'm going to take a minute to do a really nerdy deep dive into Schmidt's obsession with Norse mythology. In issue 2 of the prequel comic, Captain America First Vengeance, Schmidt attends a Wagner opera about the quest for the Holy Grail where he meets Hitler, and then he convinces Hitler's right-hand man Himmler that there are ancient valuables in the world that have mystical power, and this is how he gets the approval to go looking for the Tesseract. But all of this connects to another Wagner opera, his masterpiece, The Valkyries. Now, you probably know that opera best from this. Now, of course, we do see actual Valkyries in the MCU, but in Norse mythology, they are goddesses who determine who is actually worthy to enter Valhalla. This is why his ship at the end of the movie is called the Valkyrie. It's there to destroy every major city in the world, to effectively choose who is worthy to enter Schmidt's new paradise. Now, Schmidt listens to this opera twice throughout the movie. But the opera, The Valkyries, is also a kind of origin story for a hero called Siegfried, who in Norse mythology was called Sigurd. Sigurd, or Siegfried, is a story about a hero who kills a dragon and is guided by a bird of the forest. And, get this, Sigurd appears in this movie. So this photo is a real wooden carving in a church that's in Hilstad, Norway, depicting Sigurd and the smith Regan forging a sword to slay the dragon. And then they photoshopped the Tesseract in between them. And in the Schmidt montage, we see an image of Sigurd listening to the forest bird, who tells him to seek the Valkyrie Brunhilde. Just like how Schmidt's goal in this movie is to seek and create his own Valkyrie, the ship we see at the end of the film. So when he appears in the church, the hole in the wall is shaped like a skull with 2 shafts of light for eyes. Nice foreshadowing for his real supervillain identity. And he says,
The Führer digs for trinkets in the desert.
Another nod to Hitler looking for the Ark of the Covenant and Raiders of the Lost Ark. So Schmidt displays his powers here in the first scene, when he easily moves this crypt lid away after these men struggle to budget before him. Then he smashes a fake Tesseract, just like how Thanos, another villain searching for godhood who is worshipped by his followers, smashes the real Tesseract in Infinity War. Now, Odin hid the Tesseract on Earth, likely after using it to invent the Bifrost technology that allows Asgardians, and only Asgardians, to teleport across the 9 realms. What makes you say that? Well, after the Tesseract was returned to Earth in the Avengers, suddenly the Bifrost was repaired in time for Thor: The Dark World. But the real cube is hidden behind a fiberglass carving of Yggdrasil, the world tree from Norse mythology that guards all life. And of course, this tree now does exist in the MCU as the multiversal tree, where Loki now protects all life as the god of stories. And the Tesseract is hidden within the eye of the Midgard serpent. Now, in Norse mythology, this serpent encircles the earth. So it's fitting that it's also hiding the Tesseract, since the actual Tesseract is also hidden on Earth. After Schmidt shoots Filch, a good bit of CGI blood splashes on his Hydra pin, foreshadowing that he is actually the Red Skull. And then we go to some of the most underrated, under-talked about visual effects in the MCU. Skinny Steve Rogers. Now, they had considered doing something similar to Tom Hanks in Castaway, where they actually took 6 months off so Hanks could lose a bunch of weight. But there was no room for that in the MCU's production schedule, which meant that they had to rely on camera tricks and digital technology. So let's break down how they pulled this off to look so convincing. So on set, they shot everything 3 different ways. Once with a body double who copied Chris Evans' movements, usually to help the other actors with their eye lines, and then they would shoot the environment clean for a visual effects plate. But most importantly, they shot muscly Chris Evans wearing very baggy clothes. So the effects were done at Lola, who 5 years earlier pioneered de-aging technology for X-Men: The Last Stand. Then the Lola team would shrink down Chris Evans digitally. They made him shorter, thinned his body, thinned his face, while always leaving his face the same size so we wouldn't lose Chris Evans' performance. And guys, there is never a moment in this movie where I do not 100% buy this transformation. Just keep in mind that most of the time when actors are looking at Skinny Steve, they're actually staring at Chris Evans' belly button. Now, when Steve is trying to sign up, all of the newspapers let us know how bad the war is going for the Allies. U-boats off the Virginia coast, Nazis retake Zhytomyr. But here, on the right, upside down, the headline reads, Elite Nazi forces overwhelm Norwegian town, which is talking about the opening we just saw in Tonsberg. On his enlistment form, we see, of course, that Steve was born on July 4th, just like in the comics, but in the year 1918. Now, this was the last year of World War I, and the only year when the U.S. made a meaningful impact. So the timeline does line up that his dad died of mustard gas probably before Steve was ever born. He also says that his mom was a nurse who contracted tuberculosis, which we do see in issue 1 of the prequel comic, Captain America: First Vengeance. And then we go to one of the 3 scenes where Steve is in a movie theater. Now, at first, he is a spectator watching the real war, and then he is a spectator watching a fake war, and finally, he is on screen actually getting to fight the war. So this scene is lifted from the excellent reimagining of his origin story, The Adventures of Captain America, Sentinel of Liberty, issue